So this is a very, very good course. I've really enjoyed what we've got through so far, because it is a very personal course. It's not an academic course, although we're covering a lot of academic material, but we're actually also we're covering stuff that I have been really processing and thinking through, as I mentioned last week, for my own self. You know, when we talk about anger, there are two ways to have the discussion about anger. One, about the rights and the wrongs of anger, the academics of anger and all that jazz. And the other way is to tap into anger, moments that you are angry, feel the feeling, and then say, right, whatever it is that I'm about to say is probably all rubbish, not because it's wrong, but because it's just not applicable. We all know that when we're angry, the one thing we're not really interested in doing is thinking about, should we not, blah, 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 blah. We all know that we shouldn't really lose our heads the way we do, but we do it because that's what we're feeling like right then. And that's what obviously, in inverted commas, needs to happen. So we discussed last week a concept that after the class I was thinking about, am I happy with what I said last week? And the truth is I am happy with what I said, but I decided I was going to jump into anger this week. And I realized if I jump into anger, everyone's going to walk off saying, oh, he raised some really valid points, really good stuff. Yeah. But application is what the goal of this series is. That's the goal of transcendental Kabbalah, is that we should transcend our own selves using Kabbalah. Or maybe transcendental Kabbalah means we should take Kabbalah from up there and reverse transcend it into the here. I don't know what the opposite of transcend is. What's the opposite of transcend? Yeah, I don't like that. Descending Kabbalah. It doesn't work. So we're going to call it what it is. So, imminent. Oh, imminent Kabbalah is good. I'm putting Akiva on the marketing team. So what we want to do is recap, even though it's uncomfortable, what we said last week, which is despite what we're thinking and despite what we're feeling, Mayach Shalat al Lev. That's what we discussed last week, correct? That the mind must always must be able to own the situation, including our emotional response, so that the mind has the power over the body and the mind has the power over the emotion. And we brought that interesting story of Rav Moshe Meislish, the chassid, the disciple of the Alter Rebbe, who not only was he able to control his emotions or his feelings in a very, very tense moment, which was when Napoleon accused him of lying, but he was even able to control his anatomical response to being accused of being a liar or a spy. And not only was he able to control his anxiety, he was able to control his actual pulse and his heart from beating any differently now that he'd suddenly been confronted with the truth, which was that he was a spy. And so that showed us something fascinating, which is that it is humanly possible to achieve what we are speaking about. And that is that the mind must override if need be, but at least be able to hold the emotion in context. Now, what we also gave as a very important example last week of where the mind actually has that power was the example of if you were in Coles or if you were arguing with a loved one, whatever it was, whichever example suits you, and then you're confronted with the realization that someone is watching you and the ability to suddenly stop. And I'll use the parent-child example because that was the example that I felt at this point in my life is more relevant and happening all the time as a reassurance that my Me'ach can control my lave. And that is that you'll be in Coles or in some shop with your child. Your child's really going against your wishes, managing to pick up your emotion to a point of rage. You start telling them, "Oh, don't you ever do that, blah, 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 blah." You get to the car, "I'm warning you, little boy or little girl, don't you ever." And then you realize that there are two mortified human beings staring at you. And you go, "If you ever, get in the car." And you just control. That's it. You control. And so that's where we went last week. Now, the obvious question is, firstly, the obvious comment is, aha, good point. You have demonstrated the ability to overcome those feelings of rage or anger, what have you, whatever it is. We have the human ability. But you'll say, Menachem, we actually didn't control the feeling. We controlled the response as it manifests in a physical space. So I'm yelling and gesticulating wildly. All I have done is taken control of my gesticulation. That's all I've done, really. I haven't really taken over my emotions. I haven't taken over my feelings. I haven't taken over my anger. So while, yes, we have the ability for the mind to definitely rule the moment, is it really, or is it just really saying respond slightly differently in that way? And that's what I feel. If we just moved into what's wrong with anger, we're going to be left with, yeah, I can, but why should I? Well, I should because that's what the Tanya spoke about in last week's discussion. We were quoting Tanya as being the importance of understanding. I have two elements, the Nefesh Elokis, the Nefesh Bahamis, the higher awareness and ability to overcome self, and then the egocentric element of self, the hedonistic element of self, the self-preservation side, and the two are constantly wrestling, and one can overcome the other, which means that although, yes, self-centeredness can overcome other-centeredness, but at the same time, higher awareness and higher reason can also overcome self-centeredness and self-preservation. So we left off with these ideas. What I want to talk about this week is I want to cover actually two things. I would like to cover the 10 Sfirot, which we touched on very briefly last week. And I'd like to also talk about the 3 Levushim, the 3 garments that we all wear. So let me first tell you what the 3 Levushim are, and then let's talk about how they play out. So remember how last week we spoke about that we have these 2 nefashos, 2 souls, if you will. The animal soul, which is all about self-preservation, the animal soul that is extremely self-centered, and then the godly soul, which is a euphemism for the side of us that is able to tap into the infinite good of the universe and allow ourselves to become lost within the infinite good, and therefore we will do whatever it takes to ensure that the infinite good is all that exists, which could mean self-sacrifice if need be. You know, that idea of a person, this time of the year is a time that many people think about Israel. And when we think about some of the heroes in modern Israeli history, often the image that comes to mind is the 25 or 30-year-old officer who has a wife and child back at home and jumps on a hand grenade in a time of war in 1967 in order to protect his other soldiers. And that act is so incredible. It goes against everything that we're wired to do. Everything that we're wired to do. We're not wired to kill ourselves to save others. We're wired to kill others to save ourselves. And yet the human is able to dig in to a deeper side of self, which is, I will kill myself in this moment if need be, if that's what it takes to preserve the life on this planet. That sounds a bit evolutionary. Let's make it more romantic. If that's what it takes to preserve the life of my friends and family, that sounds better. And that's what happens. And how is it that the person is able to do that? How is it that a person is able to sacrifice themselves if we are such egocentric creatures? Is that the truth is we're not egocentric creatures. We're just naturally egocentric. But we are also just as naturally other-centered, higher-centered. It just depends which one is dominant right now. So when you're lining up in Myers on a Boxing Day sale, and for whatever reason Myers hasn't done their maths, they've only put 3 girls on the counter, and you're waiting, you're number 20 in line, and you're wondering, why do all these people come to Boxing Day and buy one thing? And they've got to line up, and I've gone shopping, I've got heaps of stuff. This idiot is buying a pair of underpants. They're always on sale. Get out of the line. And you, how many days have you been working on the job where you don't know how to press buttons on a till? She's paying cash, for crying out loud. And all these egocentric these cries of self-preservation gone wrong, because there's no self-preservation going on here. It's just my world is being really impacted. Do you not realize I have an MRI this afternoon? An MRI. I have medical concerns. And you lining up with your chazasha underpants. Get out of my way. You know, that's the Nefesh Bahamis. It's very black and white. It's either me or you. And one of us is going to have to die here. And it's going to be you, because I'm not going to die. The Nefesh Elokis is the exact opposite. The Nefesh Elokis is who am I? Why do I need to exist if I can help you exist? Why do I need money if I can feed you? Why do I need food if there are people who I've eaten today? I don't need to eat dinner. There are people who haven't eaten any food today. Let them have the food. The Nefesh Elokis is the part of self that says, I have, you don't, you can have what I have. And it's also the part that says, me or you die, you've got a kid, I've got a kid, you're not willing to jump on the grenade, I'll jump on the grenade. It's not that logical, but the ability for the human to overcome the need to self-preserve, that's a higher ability that we actually have constantly. And the struggle that we all have is the fight between the two. Now, how does each soul, if that's what we're going to call it in English, how does each nefesh express itself? How does it manifest? Because you know when you have a naughty child. I was a naughty child. So in high school, the teachers become more honest. They write, he is a naughty boy. We don't want him in the class. But earlier in my career as a student, I was labeled has a lot of enthusiasm, or a lot of energy, needs different outlets and methods of expressing himself. I had no problem expressing myself. The problem was that the teachers didn't like my jokes, as I mentioned last week. They really, what they should have written on the report is, maybe he should try different jokes because they're ruining our class. But often when we see something which has a lot of potential energy, we see the energy build up, but what is required in order for the energy to be expended is an outlet. So you can have an engine and you have a driver. You have an engine creates the energy, but you need a conduit for that energy to flow through. You need an outlet for that energy to pass through. You need direction. So the souls are energies. We have the energy of altruism and the energy of egocentricity. But energy is energy. It's a bit like what I said about the Flintstone last week. The Flintstone has potential. It's got infinite potential. You can strike the Flintstone over and over and over and over again, and it doesn't run out of charge. And even if it does, you know what I mean. It doesn't run out. You can keep striking it. You soak it in water for 100 years, take it out of the water, strike it, you get a spark. Because the potential doesn't really exist. It does exist, but it doesn't exist in that it doesn't exist within, if you cut open the flint, you're going to find fire. It exists in potential. If it is struck, then you will end up with a spark. So the potential always is there. And because potential is there, it's there, but it's not clearly identifiable because it still needs to come in contact. There still needs to be some sort of chemical reaction or chain reaction, whatever it is, in order for it to be revealed. So the nefesh, without a body, or without a lavush, without a garment, can't express itself. So let's pretend we're all very into fashion. And just think about for a moment, why did you wear the clothing that you're wearing right now to my class? Well, what is it that you're trying to say? What are you trying to tell everyone? Excuse me. What are you trying to say? Oh, I came barefoot in winter because I'm free, or I came wearing a suit because I'm a business person, or I came like this because, you know what, I don't really care how I dress, or I came like this because I'm very into the way I dress. The way we dress, whether we intend or don't intend, says so much. Our clothing says a lot about us, and our clothing is a language that we use to tell other people about us. It's a bit like, which firm was it that just fired the secretary for not wearing high heels? I don't know, whatever it was, they fired a girl for not wearing. Why? Because the secretaries at this firm wear high heels. Why? The question is why, not is it fair or not fair. In tonight's discussion, it's why would they do that? They did it because they have a certain image that they want as a corporate organization to give off. Whether you think it's fair or not, I don't care. It's not the purpose of tonight's discussion. It's about the fact that people use their clothing to send a message. That's what it's about. It's a lavush, it's a garment. But if you say, is a person a high heel? Is a person a tie? Is a person a suit? No, not at all. You know, as a child, I used to be very scared of goths. I used to be very, understandably so, right? Like goths, the people who dress in long black robes, dark black eyeliner, even the men, straight black hair, powdered white faces, blood red lips. I used to just, I don't know, maybe I watched too many horror movies. I always believed they were aspiring vampires. I actually believe they are. So I was always very scared of goths. I used to see goths on the street. You wonder, Menachem, where were you going that you always saw goths? Well, I used to go around, you know, I used to get around. And in the city, you'd see things, and I'd get scared. Then I remember when I went to New York as a 15-year-old, I'm about to say something that I'm sure someone in this room is going to interpret as being racist, but I'm just talking through the eyes of a naive Australian 15-year-old, because naive Australian 15-year-olds, when they get to New York, they think they're in one big movie set. We think every tall African American is a basketball player. And then we also think, as I did, it was nighttime in Manhattan, and I saw a couple guys with hoodies on, and I knew what their story was. They were going to mug me. Why? Because that is what I had come to believe as a 15-year-old Australian. That was my racist comment. If I don't mean to offend. I mean to identify that the way they had dressed sent a signal to me. Now, maybe they did want to genuinely dress in a street gangster way, but it doesn't mean they're gangsters. They're just, I don't know, maybe musically gifted. They're rappers or something, you know, and this is their uniform, their outfit. They're not looking to harm or anything. They just sing about it. It's not a wish, it's an expression. It's a form of art, man. So what I'm saying is we wear levushim, and the levushim tell other people things. But is it really us? No. One day, if I walked into this class with a cool shirt made of hues of brown, and it was short sleeves, I got my beard, and I put on a beanie, and I grew my hair a little, I might say, oh, he's from Fitzroy. And then if I come the next day with my black hat and my capote and my guards, I go, he's from Elsternwick. Same guy. I'm not from Elsternwick, and I'm not from Fitzroy. So what I wear tells you a lot, but it doesn't tell you who I am. That's what a levush is. So there are three levushim that the soul wears. You say the body's a levush. No, the body's a sack of flesh. That's what the body is. The body takes on personas and then expresses itself through three primary levushim, three primary garments. Those levushim have very funky names. Machshava, dibur, and maisa. Machshava is thought, dibur is speech, maisa is action. And each of the nefoshos, each of the souls, will use these things to express themselves, to let themselves out, to let their philosophy on life come to the fore. Now, in order to make these levushim operate, there has to be a conduit between the soul, which is this incredible energy, not quite a conscious energy, but a thinking energy, an energy with a thought process, although without a brain, because brains are physical. That's a guf. That's part of the guf. We're talking about, you see, the soul. Let me just give you an example. You know, when you close your eyes, you can see things, like you can use your imagination, but you don't need your eyes to see those things, but you can see them. You see images. If I asked everyone to close their eyes and imagine they're on a beach, I could take you to a beach and you'd see it. Now, what you're seeing is not with your eyes. What you're seeing is dimyon. It's imagination, but it's the mind's eye. It's the ability for the mind to conjure up an image, and you can see it. But seeing is not re'iyah. It's not with your eyes. It's seeing with your mind. The soul is able to see like that, but differently to that, in that it's not the mind's eye, but the same way you can see without your eyes, so the soul can see. The only difference is that the soul can see more like we see with our eyes, but it doesn't have eyes. If that doesn't make sense to you, that's because I just covered like what we did in 5 weeks on near death and all that. When we discussed the nature of how the soul can observe, we just covered that in like 30 seconds. But what I'm saying is, if you can imagine, if you can conceive the fact that you have an imagination, you have the power of dimyon, then you can understand when I say that the soul sees, but not through a brain, not through visual, not through the cornea, not through the eye. So the soul needs to move. It's rotzon. You see at the... I do want to get into this, but I just realized I have to. The rotzon, what's rotzon? Rotzon means desire. Ultimately, what drives a person is ultimately is desire. But I don't mean sexual desire. That's a form of desire. But want needs to be fulfilled. And ultimately, want drives thoughts. No thoughts drive wants. No thought, and I can argue both ways. I can show you both ways. How thoughts are powerful, more powerful than want and desire is more powerful than thought. But ultimately, Kabbalah explains that at the very, very core is an innate desire. An innate desire. It's a desire that is there, and it's before everything. And it's completely subconscious. It's more than subconscious, because we're talking about the soul. It's not a form of consciousness. Now, the desire needs to come through. So let's say I want my tea. How would I tell you I want my tea? So I'd think about tea. I'd think about my parched throat. And I'd think about a few other things. Then I'd conjure up a whole lot of English words. Yep, good word. Want, very good word. Tea. I think you'll understand what I'm saying. And then I say it. I want tea. I've shared with you the want. I've put the want into something and I've expressed it to you. I've put the want into the tea. I've expressed it to you. So I've used language to help you understand what I'm thinking. But the thinking is only coming to clarify, although you say, no, I had to think for myself. But I was only thinking because of you guys, because you don't read my desire. So I had to think how to put my desire into words. Before it was in words, it was an image, or it was a thought. Then the thought had to break into words. And then the words was able to lead to me moving air up through the lungs, through my larynx and all that, and out we go. And the tongue did some magical movement. My lips knew how to purse themselves just perfectly. The pop filter protected itself so that you could hear in an amplified voice, I want tea. Now, if you think about it, it's such a silly example, but look how much has gone on there. I have moved rotzon, I've moved desire through to machshava, through to my thinking. Who's the machshava for? The machshava's for you. I only thought because of you guys. I don't need to think if you're not around. I can stick with, as in conscious thinking, I can stick with much higher forms of thought to the point that I'm moving through states of awareness and meditative experience on the tea. That's not thinking. That's a whole different, there's seichel and there's machshava and there's all sorts of things. But then I had to move machshava into dibur. I had to move my thought into speech. And then the speech couldn't just be gargled words. So once again, I had to go back to my machshava. It's like, okay, but no, not to my machshava. I had to go to a different part of my brain because I'm thinking about tea, while the other parts of my brain are thinking how to get those lips moving, get those lungs pumping, get that larynx going, get the tongue moving, get the teeth wide. Everything is going on. There's so many things going on in this investment. Just drink the tea. So much just for tea. Do you realize how much is going on every day in your life? So how do we do that? For that, now I need to explain to you the 10 Sefirot. We've covered the 10 Sefirot ad nauseum over the years, and you know what? It doesn't get any more boring every time. The 10 Sefirot, Chochmah ben Adas. These are the three. For those of you who know the 10 Sefirot quite intimately, or you've studied it, you'll know that there's Keser. I'm leaving Keser out. Keser is the crown. It's above our thinking because I would like to incorporate Das. Chochmah. Chochmah is, I love Chochmah. Everyone loves Chochmah. Chochmah is the brainwave. There wasn't, and then there is. Where does Chochmah come from? Well, the truth is now I've got to bring Keser back in. Chochmah comes from nothing. As in, there was nothing, and then there was something. Who here has ever been involved in research? Who here has ever done a master's or PhD? Good. Everyone else, go away. No, God forbid. I just want to use them as an example. They're going to regret putting their hands up, and all of us smart fellas who didn't put our hands up. So, you can't just write a PhD on rubbish. These universities, well, you can, but you can't. I heard whoever made a comment over there, but as in, you can't just scribble, I don't know, how many words, 50,000 words together like a monkey and go, well, put a whole lot of monkeys in a room, they'll type up Shakespeare, so I'm a human, I'll just dabble and it'll look brilliant. You can't. Well, you apply. I'd like to do a PhD on how humans see this as red. No one has ever, we've discussed colour and red, but no one's ever looked at why polyester comes up this particular sheen of red. So you can get some really abstract, fine concepts, and then you get ideas like, will the Earth collide into the sun? That's, I suppose, something really important that we should all be aware of. Or then people start writing about global warming or rising sea levels or whatever it is that you're writing your PhD on. What is it? You have to write a chiddush. You can't write a PhD on something that's already been written unless you have a new angle. Am I correct, PhD students? Am I correct? You can't just rip off someone else's theory. You've got to have something that is substantial, that's going to be adding or refining or changing or whatever it is. Or it's a whole new idea that's never been explored before. But it's got to be a chiddush. It's got to be new. Same with the masters. It's got to be new. You can't just rip off. You can take a whole lot of other PhDs and do a PhD on those PhDs, which I actually respect. We call that refining an idea. That's a very important thing that, nowadays that is happening more and more. There are more and more PhDs happening where the PhD is on already existing written material. And this is a sign of Mashiach. This is a sign of how good the world is. Because the Mashiach is a period of where we're refining the most micro things. We're getting to the truth, not just absolute truth. Oh yes, freedom is good. We covered that already. We know freedom's good. Now we have to refine, what about in this context? We need to get to the very, very deep nitty gritty. Every scientific PhD is a step close to the universal greatness that's just at the cusp. It's just at the cusp. It's a good thing when this is happening. It's not like, we've run out of ideas. No, we're refining. We're moving into a more refined state of being and consciousness. It's a reflection on the spiritual nature of the world, which is why we're also going crazy, because when we're dealing, like atomic bombs can do so much damage, because we're dealing with micro elements. Not like, just throwing hot water on someone. We're dealing with refined micro elements that can go this way or that way because of their power. So where does chiddush come from? Where does chiddush, something new? So in order for chiddush to take place, so who here You've all done this. I know it because I've asked this before and everyone says, yeah. You know, you're trying to work something out and the answer just doesn't present itself. You're trying very, very hard, very, very hard. I'm trying to think. Come on. What's the answer? And you don't get it. And then you stop thinking about it and all of a sudden, boom, the idea pops into your head. And it's like, oh my God, that is, wow, that's chokhmah. What happened in that moment? In that moment, you stopped trying to solve something. As long as it's you trying to stop or solve something, as long as it's you trying to solve something, what is going on? There is an ego, and then there is the problem. But it is all about me solving the problem. It is not about the problem. As soon as it becomes the problem and not about me, we become open to chokhmah. Chokhmah can only take place in a state of bittul. Enlightenment can only take place when one goes through a process of ego abnegation, or more correctly, it's not ego abnegation, it's ego transparency. I don't know if that's such a term, but what it means is where you still exist for who you are, but you become transparent. It's not, you don't become opaque. You're not here to block anything. You're allowing the flow. And therefore, it's not about you. It's about your role in something much larger. So chokhmah, having a great idea, will usually take place not when you're trying, but actually when you're not trying. When you're not self-absorbed. You're just there. And it happens. Where does it come from? It comes from nowhere. It's yesh ma'ayin, something that cropped up out of nothing. So no, it didn't crop up out of nothing. When we say the term yesh ma'ayin, something from nothing, we don't necessarily mean that there is nothing, because there is always something. But what we're saying is that there is no link at all between the nothing and the something. That you can't draw a series of dominoes saying, well, that led to that, that led to that. That chain reaction is not apparent when you have a brilliant idea. Because if it was, you could have initiated that chain reaction whenever you wanted. So, no, it's because there's poverty. It led him to think. No, rubbish. There's poverty for all time. We didn't think of things. It's only in the moment of not being that it happens. In the moment of ayin, in the state of not being is where the something was able to take place. And that's chokhmah. Now, there's a problem with chokhmah. And that is that it's too big. Chokhmah is too big for the brain. Which is why Eureka. I love this story. What's the story of Eureka? Everyone hears the story their own version. This is the version I took out. There was a naked man running through the street. That's what I heard in the story. Yes, he was in a bathtub and the water spilled over, but it took me years to learn what displacement was. I just heard the part about a naked man running through the street yelling out, Eureka. You do know what I'm talking about, right? Does anyone not know what I'm talking about? All right. There's a bloke having a bath. And this is in the olden days, before they knew what about weight displacement and mass displacement. And he gets in the bath and it overflows with water. And in that moment, he realizes that his body has displaced the water. And he realizes the ramifications of what can be measured, the accuracy through which things can be measured by placing something in a contained amount of water. The mass will displace and the density will displace. And as a result, you'll be able to accurately measure the weight, the density, whatever it is, of the item that has now displaced the water. So if you want to know, before we had the scientific methods that we have today of complex MRIs and everything, how did we know what the head weighed? You chopped it off. Well, this was provided you didn't need the person. But you chopped their head off and you put it in a bucket of water. Now you say, but if you put a basketball in water, no, this is the beauty. This is the beauty of physics. You say there are air cavities and stuff. Yes, but there is also thicker bone density, and the weight of our organs and fluids, etc., is very similar to that of water. And as a result, the displacement could give us a very accurate reading on us. Like, I used to be a part of this, but it gives us, people, humanity, a reading on the weight of a head. And that's because of this chap who got into the bath. Now, And so at the end of the story, he couldn't believe what had happened. Naked as everything, he runs into the streets yelling, "Eureka, Eureka, I've made a great discovery." So I, as a schoolboy, heard a story about a naked bloke running through the streets and didn't get arrested. In fact, he is now in every physics textbook. So I have run the streets naked many times, and I'm yet to be placed in a textbook for anything. Actually, apparently, I'm in a psychiatric textbook. Anyway, so okay, so that chachma, why did he go running through the streets naked? Come on, put on a robe, call up the king, or send him a pigeon with a message, because it was before telephones. Send him a pigeon. I've made a discovery. But what does he do? He runs through the streets like a madman. So some would say it was a branding. It was a brilliant piece of marketing. You see, we're still telling the story. But the truth is, it wasn't a branding exercise. He had experienced chachma. And chachma is so broad, it is usually larger than the mind, and it is faster than the mind. When you have had an incredible chachma, when you've had an incredible idea, oh my God, I'm never going to get to what I want to get to. When you have a brilliant idea, what do you have at the same time? Absolute clarity. Absolute clarity. You see the beginning and the end and everything. What you don't see is the micro details of that clarity. The Rebbe Rashab, Rebbe Sholem Ber of Lubavitch, lived 100 plus years ago, died 100 plus years ago, I should say. Very encyclopedic, methodical thinker, and wrote tens of thousands of pages stretching out Kabbalah so that people could understand it as it related to the human and our psychology. I quote him a lot. And the Rebbe Rashab compares this moment, actually not this moment, but I'm borrowing it for this moment, to the untrained eye appreciating a piece of art. So what's the difference between a trained artist and an untrained artist? A trained artist looks at a piece of, who here has ever seen people who sit at a class? I've got on my whiteboard a whole lot of pictures of me. And it's not that I'm into self-grandeur, but these are just people who, like, at the end of a class gave me a portrait of me. Let's sit here for an hour or 5 hours or whatever, drawing me, and then they give it to me. I always get them to autograph in case one of them ever make it. I look at it, I see a picture of me, and I'm like, this is brilliant. Artists look at it and go, this person's never going to make it. They're hopeless. So why? It looks exactly like me. I say, it looks nothing like you. What's the difference? Because to the trained eye, the trained artist has learned artistic theory, artistic method. First, you draw the inner anatomy. Then you draw the externalities. But you look at this, and it's one eye socket's like this, and one eye socket's like that. And it's like, I didn't even notice that. So of course you didn't notice it, because you never studied art. And even when people do the eye sockets all over, like Picasso, it's not because he doesn't know what he's doing. It's because he knows what he's doing. We don't know what he's doing, so we think it's ridiculous. But those who have studied art will say, the man is a genius. An ear over the ear is in the middle. Do you know what he's saying? Dear, do write him a check for $100 million. I need that. Yeah. The artist, the true artist, the person who has studied artistic art theory and method has learnt the detail. And therefore, when they look at a painting, they don't see a painting. They see a story. They see words. They see a narrative. They see detail. They see how this color and that color, that brush stroke with that brush stroke, this layer on that layer. And they can see beauty, and they can see the most horrid expressions of nasty mixtures of colors on a canvas. Then you get people like me, go to the Guggenheim Museum. I'm a bit lost. But take me to, I don't know, some impressionist art thing. Like, right, I see what's going on here. That's amazing. That's amazing. So what is it? Why do I not get one but I get another? Because to the untrained eye, I look at an art piece, I see the whole picture. Yeah, that looks like what it's meant to look like. That's a forest. Yeah, that's a forest. But what I don't see is the detail of each brush stroke. I don't see the detail. So to me, I see the whole thing. But what I actually see is nothing. The artist, when they look at it, they see millions of details, hours of work. It's incredible. So chokhmah is like what the untrained eye sees in a very large canvas. It's almost too big to look at. So chokhmah is too big for the mind, which is why no one who has a chokhmah can ever explain it to someone else. So this naked man is running through the streets, and just let's imagine it took place in, 1870 London, and there's a foggy night, and there's a man running through the streets naked, eureka, eureka, and there's a hello, hello, hello. What's going on here? And he's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. It's like, oh, I'm sure you can't. Come right this way. And it's like into the asylum, into the sanitarium for this person. This person's just studied physics, just come up with one of the most amazing physics. No, yeah, I'm sure, young man, you can follow me. And that's it. That's it. It's too great to put into words, chokhmah. For that you need binah. Binah is the breakdown of a fantastic idea or fantastic concept into small pieces so that it is all communicatable, so it is all able to be worked through. I'm not spending anywhere near as much time on binah. I'm sorry, we haven't got all night. After binah, which you can understand is the breakdown of the entire thing. While you can't see it all in one shot, it's like a movie reel. If you just look across, or a book, you can't look at a book in one shot. You can't. You've got to turn the pages. But if you turn the pages, you get the progress. And when you finish it, you remember the whole story, but you remember it chronologically. Binah is chronological. You can't see the whole thing, but what was number 17 about? Oh, that is this part. And what's 21? That part. Well, think about 17:21. I can't think of two things at the same time, but I can think of both things individually. So binah, you have the whole thing, but not necessarily all in your vision. You can take someone through it. Da'as is the process of then being able to take someone else through your binah. So I can take them through. So das is refined for the purpose of then communication. Okay, so that's the upper three of the 10 sfirot. The lower 7, chesed, gvura, tiferes. Chesed is kindness. So now we're talking into emotions. So we've got thought process and then we've got emotions. Chesed is kindness, outwardness. Gvura is restraint, holding back. These are character traits as well as emotions. Tiferes is beauty or balance, or it's just getting the perfect ratio of chesed and gevura in any situation, of where the right amount of love, but the right amount of restraint, that sort of stuff. So it's beautiful. It's beautiful because it's in harmony. Harmony is another word for tiferes. Netzach is confidence. Or resilience, that ability, that self-confidence in the process. Hod is humility. Yesod is pragmatics. And Malchus is the delivery. So in anything that you do, you go through all those 10 sfirot. You have an idea, and then you think about it, and then you're ready to translate it into something. So let's say I'm a parent. Let's go with the parenting idea again. So I'm a parent. And my child is misbehaving. So I don't know what to do. My child is misbehaving. Chokhmah. Chokhmah is an idea that occurs to me of how to deal with it. But I'm not ready to deal with it. Binah, I need to develop this idea. Make sure I know what I'm thinking. Da'as, I'm ready to execute the idea. I'm going to grab my child by the wrist. Chesed. I don't want to grab him too hard. I love this child. I don't want to make them cry. I love him. I'm completely other-centered. Gvura, stop that. Stop that inner sobbing. Your child just ran on the road. Now is not a time to cry about grabbing their wrist. Grab their wrist. Chesed says, no, don't. Gvura says, grab it and squeeze tight. And Tiferes is like, whoa. Squeeze, but not too hard. Bit of balance, fellas. Netzach, the confidence to do what you're about to do. Back yourself, back your judgment. Hod, humility. It's not that I'm angry with you. It's that you did something unsafe. I need to be here for you. Yesod, get ready to deliver. Malchus, grab the hand. Grab the hand. You saw? You go through this process in every single moment of your life. It goes this fast, this fast, this fast. Malchus. It's always happening. It's the thought process, the emotional response, and the delivery. This takes place in all three cases. So this is how the soul spreads its message. It gets the message through to Chochmah, develops it, das, chesed, gvura, it's going to be this, whatever. But then it needs, how's it happening? So when you speak, this is what happens. When you think, this is what happens. And when you act, this is what happens. So Maisa, let's look at the first lavush. Remember, this is a course on anger, fear, and regret. So let's use those as examples this week. And let's stick with anger because it's the easiest one to talk about. So the lavush of Maisa, the garment of action. So when you're angry and you translate that anger into an action, what happens? There is hitting or gesticulating wildly, the waving of hands or whatever it is. It's an action. It might be a punch, it might be a kick, it might be who knows what. It's the action of anger. If we go back to last week, the mind is able to rule the heart. The mind has to have dominance in every situation to be able to behold what is going on, to be able to make a conscious decision as to whether or not this is the right thing. So the mayach, the mind, not the machshava, not the thinking, the mind is we already saw. The mother or the father is going nuts in the car park at their child. Don't you ever! And then the mind becomes aware it's being watched. Whoop, shut it down. Shut the whole thing down. Stop the waving of hands and get a grip and get in the car. That's what the voice inside our head is saying very, very quickly to the point that we don't even hear it. So there we see Moech shalat ala maisa, that the mind is able to control the action. Okay, good. Words. Can the mind control words? Most definitely, because words are a maisa. It's just that action is the very, very broadest way of understanding of action. So action, it means action. But the truth is, speech is an action. It's not quite the same sort of action. You know, this is an action. See this? But I've been acting until now the whole time as well. I've been moving my jaw and I'm communicating through words. Words are an action. So when we talk about these levushim, these externalities, yeah, I understand how actions are not who I am. They are things that I do. Well, guess what? Words are not who I am either. They are things that I say. And we all know that the things that we say are not really who we are. They might be windows into who we are. They might be glimpses into a moment of what we are, but it's not who we are. Not at all. If I lost myself right now, and I was like, I just got a terrible SMS, something terrible, and I just said, you all thought I was about to say it. Come on, people. And he's like, oh my, oh my, didn't know he knew that word. And I didn't realize he was so uncouth, using that F word so freely. Maybe he doesn't realize what it means. It was actually funny, when I was in yeshiva, there was a guy, when I was studying overseas in a yeshiva, so there was a guy, and he was French, and we were 20 years old, and he stubbed his toe. I don't know what happened. I only got in on the action as all of a sudden we heard this roaring. There are 350 guys learning in the base medrash in the study hall. And all of a sudden we hear this Frenchie go, oh! And he swears at the top of his lungs, like just at that moment. And we see one of the rabbis, they all sat on platforms where they were just slightly elevated desks. And one of them stands up. And he just walks right over and he calls him over. And this is where I got to be in, because he calls him over to the side of the study hall where my table was with my study partner, my chavrusa. And he says, was ist geschehen? What happened? And the guy says, I hurt my toe. And he says, I used language that's it's completely inappropriate. There's a knas. There's a punishment for using such language. He says, and this guy moved so quickly. He says, what did I say? So the rabbi says, you don't know what you said? So he says, yeah, I know what I said. He said, so what do you mean? What did I say? What did you say? You know what you said. He said, yeah, but why am I getting a knas? He said, because what you said is completely inappropriate. It's not how we speak. Why am I getting punishment? So he says, what did I say that was so bad? So the rabbi looks at him and says, do you not know what you said? He said, yeah, I said. And the rabbi says, are you aware that that word is an inappropriate word? He says, and he says again, as a question, let's just pronounce it fudge. He says, fudge? That's a word we don't use? We always use it. And the rabbi is like looking at him bewildered. He says, no. He says, and he pulls out the French, but I'm French card. I didn't realize it was a bad word. I hear guys using it, and this guy legitimately did learn English in yeshiva. Not a lot of Frenchies, as you know, aren't necessarily obnoxious. They genuinely don't speak English, some of them. And he learned English in the base medrash. He learned English through learning with us Gemara, whatever it is. He could speak Hebrew and Yiddish, but he learned English from the English speakers. So he knows full well. He knows. He was an idiot. He watched movies before. And he cries naive. He says, oh, I didn't know that was a bad word. Anyway, he got off the knas, and he did, and that's it. All was fine. Didn't get in trouble. So what was wrong with using the F word? What would have been so bad if he used it? It's because it's an uncouth, it's an unrefined, it's a term that is grob, it's dirty. It's because it's taking such a sacred, beautiful thing and turning it into a word that is used in a very negative circumstance, hence why it's taboo. Well, it used to be taboo. It's not that taboo, as we once discussed. But what he said was something that if you saw a rabbi speak like that, you go, rabbi speak like that? Come on. Hey, Tochen, how could a rabbi speak like that? So our speech is an action. It's just a more refined form of action. And it does give you a glimpse into what I am at that moment, but it doesn't give you a glimpse into who I am. Just as if you met this French bacher, this French student, you wouldn't have said, oh yeah, he's just a street urchin. I've heard him use the F word. You would have said, at that moment, he didn't speak nicely. So that's that. So we can understand. You have mayach, you have your mind, and you're about to say something. Have you ever been in this situation? You see someone and they're saying, "Oh, by the way, I was with Stacy," and you want to go, "You with Stacy? Are you aware that Stacy hates your guts? Like, what are you spending time?" And you just control yourself. I'm not going to speak lashon hara. I'm not going to speak ill of another person. But you really want to. The Nefesh HaBahamis really wants to. But the Nefesh Elokis says no. And while these thoughts are going backwards and forwards, what is actually happening is we're restraining what? Well, there's no action to restrain because we're not dealing with a punch. There are no thoughts to restrain because we're not focused on that. We're restraining speech. Speech is a levush. It's an externality. And it is an action of sorts. It is an external form of self. And the mind is able to control speech, as we see every single day, just as the mind is able to propagate speech and it's able to make you say things. The mind gets us to say things, and the mind is powerful enough to stop us. Have you ever been in a situation where I really want to say something, and you just know that it's ethically wrong, so you don't? Well, that's a moment of restraint, of where you've withheld. Then comes thought. You go, I know where you're building this up. Action, speech, you think thoughts. And yes, it's not me. This is built on what we were saying last week from the Tanya. Machshava, thinking, is an action. It is an action. It's a very subtle action. It's a very internal action. But it's actually not us. Our thinking is not us. Our thinking is a lavush. It's just the lavush. It's the garment that is closest to us. It's a bit like our underwear. Let me give you an example. For this, I shall borrow the example of maybe a 4-year-old. So a 4-year-old, actually no, a 15-year-old. It's a lot easier. 15-year-olds particularly male 15-year-olds, particularly the male 15-year-olds that I went to camp with, often found a way of getting around having the compulsory shower on Friday. And what they did was they changed their clothing. So late Friday in camp, we'd meant to go shower for Shabbos because Friday night was coming, and then you'd go get dressed for Shabbos. You put on a white shirt, you put on black pants, and you go meet in the dining room, in the camp hall, whatever. So what the guys who couldn't be bothered showering would do, which is why I could say 5 or 15, is they would get undressed and put on a white shirt and black pants, tuck themselves in, brush their hair, and you see, I'm all clean. No one even thinks that they're not clean. What they didn't do was change their underwear. Now, the mothers in the room are like, yeah, where's the joke here? So far I relate to everything you've just said. I'm not sure. But for others, for the men who need to cast their memories back, we all know what that's like. Like, yeah, I think I can get probably one more day out of it. You know, it's like bed sheets. Yeah, one more week. So I'm sorry if anyone's grossed out. It's like watching a National Geographic program on human beings. It's one of the hardest ones to watch. But the point is that just because I've changed my outside, it doesn't mean I've changed my inside. And often we don't change our insides because our insides are not really our insides. They're just the deepest layer of externality, in that they are the externality that is closest to us. Remember what I said earlier? When I wanted the tea, I had to think. Why did I have to think? In order to tell you that I wanted tea. So my thinking, who was it for? It was for you. Do I need to think those thoughts? No, I don't. You say, but Menachem, thinking is a part of who we are. We can't turn our thoughts off. And it's very important. Thoughts are not thinking. Just because they both begin with TH, it doesn't mean they're the same thing. Thinking is a verb. Thoughts are not. Thoughts pop up in the mind. Thinking is something that we engage in. You say, no, I don't engage. There are thoughts I don't want to be thinking about. Just because you don't want to think about it doesn't mean you don't want to think about it. We, in our culture, and I don't mean our religion, I'm not being politically correct here. In our culture, in the Western culture, in the Western school system that we have here in Australia, we have never been taught, we've only been told, you must think. You know, you really need to think about it. No one has ever taught us to not think. So we think thinking is natural. It is natural, but it's not obligatory. And what it says in Tanya is that your machshava is a lavush. You put on the clothing, you take off. There's a famous story of a student who wanted to understand, what do you mean you block thoughts? So his master said, go to the house of Reb Aaron of Kalin. Reb Aaron of Kalin was a great mystic and a great sage a few hundred years ago. And the student travels to the house of Reb Aaron, gets to the house of Reb Aaron. It's one of these wooden European shacks, one of these, classic sort of story. Probably a door, 2 windows, a chimney, black smoke, all the rest. And it was probably snowing. And he knocks on the door. And there's no response. He keeps knocking, no response. As it gets dark, he can see the lights are on inside. And he can see Reb Aaron inside with his family. And no one is responding, and it's pounding, and it's getting cold because the snow's falling, for it's a story in Europe. And it's pounding, let me in, and he's at the window knocking, Aaron, Reb Aaron, let me in. And the whole night he's outside. The whole night he spends outside. In the morning, he's hungry, he's tired, he's cold. He comes to the door, he knocks on the door, and Reb Aaron opens up. He says, oh, a choshev a guest, a special guest has come. Please come in. He's like, what? Have you not changed your hearing aid all night? Like, well, I've been knocking all night, and now you're telling me I'm such a special person? And Reb Aaron sees the quizzical look on his face, and he says, the guy hasn't spoken, he says, I don't have to let everyone in just because they're knocking on the door. Our thoughts come knocking on our door. We've never been taught to close that door, so we actually don't realize that they knock. We think they walk right in, and you know what? They do walk right in because they don't need a knock anymore. There's a sign on the door in our brain, everyone welcome. Everyone. You're an axe murderer? Please, come in. You're into weird, I don't know, pornographic stuff? Please, come in. Are you into charity? Come in. You're into come in. So we're always thinking because we've always welcomed the thought. We have trained the mind to think. And we've trained the mind to think as soon as it's given bait. So as soon as we're given bait, we think. As soon as a thought pops up, it must be there to think about. The Baal Shem Tov says, thoughts are there to tell us all sorts of things, but they're not there to tell us to think. Thoughts are there to help us analyze ourselves. Thoughts are there because we sometimes need to think. Thoughts are there because it's part of the deeper consciousness, the super consciousness. Thoughts are the clothing of the soul. But thinking is a lavush that the body has, and we, with our consciousness, choose to either say, yeah, I'm going to think about it or not. And because we're so used to always thinking, we always think. Says the Alter Rebbe, says Rebbe Aaron of Kalin, says the Baal Shem Tov, says all the mystics of the last 500 years, you don't need to think. Thinking is a lavush. Just as you don't need to speak, you don't need to think. You say, no, I need to. Well, someone who says they need to think is no different from the person who has foot and mouth disease, the person that always says the wrong thing at the wrong time. I can't control myself. Yes, you can. You're just not used to it. Or it's like the person who always does stuff and they shouldn't. I can't control myself. Yes, you can. You're just not used to it. Thought, speech, and action are all, not only are they levushim, but they're all controllable. They're all controllable. These are levushim. These are garments that we put on, and if we can put them on, we can take them off. The thing is, if it's caked on and you're not used to taking it off, yeah, it's going to be pretty hard, at least the first time. But we can train, no worries. You can train people to do anything. The problem is because we don't train enough, we end up in a funny, weird, circular stage of when we think we do an action and those actions condition our thinking. These are habits. So habits are what? They're the fastest way to get stuff done because you don't have to think. When you have a habit, you don't have to think. That's why habits are so good. If you have good habits, you don't have to think about being good because you do it. So if you can create more positive habits, you can save your thinking for the hard decisions instead of the easy decisions. If you haven't got any habits, then you're going to have to do a lot of thinking and you're going to feel very tired. So actions can inform not thinking, but mental processing. And you can become faster and faster and faster, as those who have ever taught maths. You know, we teach kids 9 times 9 is 81, 9 times 9 is 81, until you don't think 9, 18, 27, 36, 45, 56, 81. You just know 9 times 9 is 81. That was an easy one. 12 times 12, 144. I didn't think. I know it because it's a piece of information. I know 12x, 12, line, 144. It's not a mathematical process. There's no intelligence in me giving you that answer. It's just something that's a part of me. I don't have to waste my time thinking on that stuff. So, and therefore it informs an action. So actions can inform thoughts and thoughts inform actions, and we're on this vicious hamster wheel of that's what's taking place. And speech is just a different action. It's like people, you know, when you suffer from anxiety, in a particular case, you've got anxiety. Someone is going to say something, and every time they speak to you, you get anxious. So you might have this natural thing, and you say, I don't want to respond to them. I don't want to respond to them. And they start talking and go, yeah. So I don't want to be saying yeah. Why am I saying yeah? Why? Because that's the action that is the response to the thought process that has become a part of you. You don't have to go yeah nervously when someone's talking to you, but you do that because when you're nervous, that's what you do, and so you're used to that's what you do. It's the mind circumventing the brain. So what we can see from tonight is that our thoughts, speech, and action are not who we are. We're not pre-programmed to do this. We adopt these postures. Some of them are more natural, some of them less natural, but none of them are our DNA that my DNA dictates you must do this. Just as jumping on a grenade. And no matter how many behavioral psychologists you consult with, you can't just say, oh yeah, we're all programmed, because look how many people don't jump on grenades. It's a conscious moment. Very fast moment, whatever it is, but it's a conscious moment. We don't have to do anything. We can either be at the whim of the nefesh bahamis, which is what we call the natural self, the nefesh hativis. It's the nefesh hativis. What you naturally are is your animal soul. So if you naturally self-preserve, that's evolutionary thing. That's what we are. We are our animal soul. It's been with us for a lot longer than our godly soul, than the Nefesh Elikis. But the Nefesh Elikis empowers us to be able to override our Nefesh Bahamis. So we are not our Nefesh Bahamis, we are not our Nefesh Elikis, as we discussed last week, nor are we our thoughts, speeches, or actions. These are all different layers of who we are. You know where this is going. You know where I'm going next week. Last week I said that the mind, that the self-awareness, that the nefesh hasichlis, the intelligent component of self, is able to weigh up every single situation. The sfirot are dictated to based on the sfirot are mechanisms that are used by each nefesh depending on the situation, and it manifests in the form of thought, speech, and action. So if I'm angry, am I angry? Or am I choosing to express my anger in a thought, a speech, or an action? You say, so I'm not even allowed to think about anger? Booyah. Correct. For those that don't speak street. That's right. That's right. Even thinking a negative thought is not allowed. But this isn't about the law of is it allowed or is it not allowed. This is about the spirituality of is it possible, is it not possible. And what we've discovered tonight is that, of course, it's possible, because the law of Shalat al-Lev, the understanding of the nefesh elikis and the nefesh bahamis and the nefesh sichlis, the understanding of the sfirot as being a process of transmitting a message to the levushim of machshava dibra maisa. Let me say that in English. The process of mind over emotion. The understanding that we are made up of three souls, even more, but let's just stick with the three, of the animal, the higher conscious, and the intelligent, all which use the mechanisms of the 10 sfirot to inform any one of the three garments of thought, speech, and action, is what translates into our thinking and our doing and our speaking in any given moment. So now when we talk about anger, and now when we talk about regret, and now when we talk about fear, which is what we're going to do over the next 2 weeks, we don't need to spend, you see, in the last series we spent a long time on what is wrong with anger. Now we can divvy up anger, and we'll next week get to the question that you asked last week, because I had to insert this week, unfortunately. Now we can divvy up what is anger, what am I thinking, why am I thinking, am I going to stop the thinking? Do I want to indulge the thinking? Am I going to allow the thinking to manifest into a spoken word, or will it be an action? Or am I going to stop the whole thing? So not just am I going to stop the action, I'm going to stop the thinking. That's where this course is going. We have to understand anger. We have to understand regret. We have to understand fear. We have to understand what is the good in any of those. What are the parts that we need to hold on to? What are the parts that we want to discard, so that we can, at any given point, engage our nefesh hasichlis, our intelligent self, to actually take command of the lave, of the emotional response, of the instinctive emotional response. And yes, we can change our instincts. Yes, we can.